So now you're ready to begin Module 2. In Module 2, we're going to build on the work that we did in Module 1, talking about the American system of government, specifically the judicial branch, and then specifically a particular case. So in Module 2, you're going to begin to see how particular rules are used to come to outcomes, projected outcomes for clients. So first we're going to talk about the different types of legal rules, then the differences between the types, and then a process for working with express rules. So the different types of legal rules. Basically, there's some overlap between common law and enacted law, and then between express rules and synthesized rules. So enacted law are always going to be express rules, and you're going to find these express rules in statutes, rules, regulations, and executive orders. Now we're going to focus primarily on statutes, but the same thing applies for rules, regulations, and executive orders. The next type of law is common law, and the types of rules that we see in common law are both express rules, those that you see in a single judicial opinion, as well as synthesized rules, those rules that are derived from multiple opinions. Now, we'll talk about synthesized rules later. Right now, we're going to focus only on express rules in both statutes and in cases. So what are the differences between these types of rules? In an express rule, or in enacted law express rule, the idea is just as important as the exact language. And so that's why I've got exact language on the screen in quotation marks, because the exact word choice, the syntax, the grammar, everything in an enacted rule is just as important as the substance or the idea of the rule. So with express rules that you find in statutes, you have to pay particular attention to the exact language, and we're going to see in later videos how that plays out. Now, in express rules that you find in common law or in court decisions, it's only the idea. The court decisions that articulate a particular rule may all articulate it slightly differently, and that's okay. The exact language is not nearly as important as the substance. And that's why when you begin communicating about legal rules in writing, you're going to directly quote enacted express rules, whereas you're usually only going to paraphrase common law express rules. The process for working with rules then depends on whether you have an express rule or a synthesized rule. It's not as important whether it's enacted or common law once you get down to working with the rule. So express rules, the ones that you see both in enacted law, statutes, rules, regulations, etc., and the express rules that you see in common law, the process is that you start with an articulated rule. The rule is given for you, and then your job is to break that rule down into its elements. Synthesized rules, which we'll deal with later, have the exact opposite approach. You actually start with elements, and then you are responsible for articulating or pulling that together into a rule. So with express rules, you're given the rule and you break it into elements. With synthesized rule, you have the elements and then you pull that into a rule. So the process for working with express rules, for breaking that down into elements, is given to you in the chapter. And it tells you that you're going to first break the rule down into its parts. The parts are primarily the elements, the causal term, the result, and any exceptions that may exist. Now, the elements are what trigger the result, and the causal term is what tells us the relationship between the triggering events and the result. And we'll see how that plays out in a couple of exercises. And then you're going to look at each part separately. Once you've broken it down into its component parts, you're going to take each part and analyze that separately. Then you're going to put the rule back together in a way that makes sense to work with it with a particular set of facts. Now, obviously, if you're putting the rule back together to work with a particular set of facts, that becomes significantly easier if you have a set of facts to work with. So on the first exercise that we're going to do in a future video, you'll see that we have a rule that we'll break down that we don't apply to a set of facts, but then in a subsequent exercise, we will use a set of facts to apply it to. So next up is a video that covers exercise 1, a rule on late papers. So you'll want to do that exercise before you watch that video.